The first time Ethan mocked me, I laughed it off, thinking it was just his rough-edged humor. By the third time, his words cut deeper than I'd ever admit. Each syllable a blade slicing through the fragile armor I'd built as a gay man in a world that didn't always understand. We were roommates in a cramped Brooklyn apartment. Two strangers thrown together by a Craigslist ad and a desperate need for cheap rent. But I never expected his casual cruelty to become the spark that would change both our lives. I'm Lucas Hayes, 26. A graphic designer with dreams bigger than the shoebox room I called home. I'd grown up in a small Ohio town, where being openly gay meant whispers and sideways glances. So moving to New York felt like freedom. Ethan Carter, my roommate, was the opposite, a 27-year-old construction worker with a broad chest, a louder laugh, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. His hazel eyes sparkled with mischief, but they could turn cold when he tossed out a joke about my dating life or the pride flag magnet on our fridge. You're not one of those flamboyant types, are you, Luke? He'd say, smirking, as if my identity was a punchline. I'd shrug, swallow the sting, and keep the peace because rent was $800 each, and I wasn't about to lose that. But peace was a fragile thing. One humid July evening, I came home from a long day at the design firm, my portfolio under my arm, only to find Ethan sprawled on our thrift store couch, a beer in hand, his buddies laughing at something on his phone. Yo, Luke, he called, his voice thick with mockery. You didn't tell me you were bringing your boyfriend to the barbecue next week. His friend snickered, and my stomach twisted. I hadn't even mentioned the barbecue, let alone a boyfriend. I forced a smile, muttered something about work, and retreated to my room, the weight of his words pressing against my chest. That night, as I stared at the ceiling, I made a vow I'd prove him wrong not just about me, but about everything he thought he knew. Unbeknownst to Ethan, I'd been working on a side hustle, a passion project that was about to change everything. For months, I'd been freelancing for a startup called Vibe Studio, a creative agency with big ambitions. They'd just landed a major client, and their lead designer had quit unexpectedly. Late one night, my phone buzzed with an email from Vibe CEO, Lucas. We want you as creative director. Can you start next week? My heart raced. At 26, I was about to lead a team, oversee multi-million-dollar campaigns, and most shockingly manage a staff that included a certain construction worker turned junior designer named Ethan Carter, who'd just been hired through a temp agency. He had no idea. The next morning, I kept my secret close, watching Ethan strut around the apartment, oblivious, as he bragged about his new gig at Vibe. Gonna be working with some big shots, he said, tossing a protein bar in the air. Hope they don't stick me with some uptight boss. I bit back a smile, my pulse quickening at the thought of the moment he'd walk into the office and see me behind the desk. But this wasn't just about proving a point. Something deeper stirred in me, need to show Ethan that the man he mocked was more than a stereotype, more than a roommate he could dismiss. I wanted him to see me. Over the next few days, the tension in our apartment grew. Ethan's jabs became bolder, like he was testing how far he could push. You going to that gay bar again? Luke, don't bring back any glitter. He teased one evening, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to fire back. Instead, I channeled my anger into my work, sketching designs late into the night, preparing for my new role. I wasn't just fighting for a promotion. I was fighting for respect mine, and every person like me who'd ever been reduced to a punchline. By the time Monday rolled around, I was ready. I slipped into a tailored blazer, my nerves buzzing as I headed to Vibe's sleek Manhattan office. Ethan left earlier, still clueless, his construction boots clomping out the door. As I stepped into the elevator at Vibe, I caught my reflection, a man who'd clawed his way out of a small town, who'd turned pain into power. I wasn't just Lucas anymore. I was the boss. And Ethan was about to learn that the hard way. The Vibe Studio office was a whirlwind of glass walls, neon accents, and the hum of creative chaos. I stood at the head of the conference room, my heart pounding as I adjusted my tie, waiting for the team to file in. Ethan was the last to arrive, his confident stride faltering when he saw me at the front. A nameplate reading Lucas Hayes, creative director, on the table. His hazel eyes widened, then narrowed, as if he could will this reality away. "You," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for me to hear. I met his gaze, steady and unyielding, and said, "Welcome to the team. Ethan, let's get to work." The room buzzed with introductions, but Ethan's shock was palpable, his usual swagger replaced by a tense silence. I didn't gloat, not yet. Instead, I dove into the meeting, outlining our new campaign for a major fashion brand. My voice was calm, but inside, I was electric. Every word I spoke was a quiet rebellion against the months of his mockery. Ethan sat at the far end of the table, arms crossed, his jaw tight. I could feel his resentment, but I also caught something else in his glance: curiosity, maybe even a flicker of respect. After the meeting, I assigned Ethan to a small design task, something simple to test his skills. He bragged about his new job, but I knew from his file that he was a beginner, transitioning from construction to design through a temp agency's training program. "I want your mock-up by end of day," I told him, keeping my tone professional. He nodded curtly, his lips pressed into a thin line, and stormed off to his cubicle. I wondered if he'd confront me later. But for now, I had a team to lead. Back at the apartment that evening, the air was thick with unspoken words. Ethan was already home, sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Didn't know you were such a big deal, Luke," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm but softer than usual. I set my bag down, meeting his gaze. "There's a lot you don't know about me," I replied, letting the words hang. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Instead, he looked away, his fingers tapping nervously on his beer bottle. Over the next week, work became a battleground of egos. Ethan pushed back on every critique I gave, his design sloppy, his attitude defiant. "You're just picking on me," he snapped during a review, his voice low but heated. The other designers glanced at us, sensing the tension. "I'm doing my job," I said evenly. "If you want to keep yours, step up." His face reddened, but he didn't argue. That night, I overheard him on the phone with a friend, his voice muffled through the thin apartment walls. "My boss is a hard ass." Didn't expect it to be him. Something shifted after that. Ethan started showing up early, his designs improving, though he'd never admit he was trying to impress me. I caught him watching me during meetings, his expression unreadable. One afternoon, he lingered after a brainstorming session, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Why didn't you tell me you were the boss?" he asked, his tone more curious than accusatory. I leaned back in my chair, considering my answer. "You didn't exactly make it easy to share good news," I said. He flinched, and for a moment, I saw guilt in his eyes. Outside of work, our apartment became a strange mix of tension and truce. Ethan stopped with the jabs, but he wasn't exactly warm either. One night, I came home to find him cooking something he rarely did: 2 plates of spaghetti on the table. "Figured we could eat together," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. I sat down, surprised, and we ate in near silence, the clink of forks louder than our words. It wasn't an apology, but it felt like a start. By the end of the second week, I noticed Ethan's designs were getting better, cleaner lines. older concepts. He was learning, and I couldn't help but feel a spark of pride. But I also saw the way he looked at me now, not just as a boss, but as someone he was trying to understand. I wondered if he was starting to see past the label he'd slapped on me. And, if I was honest, I was starting to see past his bravado too. There was something vulnerable in Ethan, something he hid behind his rough edges. I wasn't sure what it meant, but it made my heart ache in a way I hadn't expected. The office became a strange mirror of our apartment tense. Charged, but with moments of unexpected connection. Ethan's work ethic surprised me. He'd stay late, tweaking designs, his brow furrowed in concentration. I'd catch myself watching him, noticing the way his hands moved over his tablet, deliberate and strong. But every time our eyes met, he'd look away, as if caught doing something he shouldn't. I wondered what he was thinking, but I didn't dare ask. Not yet. One Friday, I assigned the team a high-stakes project, a pitch for a national ad campaign. Ethan volunteered for a key role, his voice steady but his eyes darting to me for approval. I nodded, hiding my surprise. "Don't let me down," I said, and he gave a tight smile, like he was determined to prove something. Over the weekend, I found him sketching at our kitchen table, papers scattered, coffee mugs piling up. "You're working hard," I said, leaning against the counter. He shrugged, but his cheeks flushed. "Gotta keep up with the boss," he muttered, and I couldn't tell if he was joking or serious. Monday's pitch was a success, and Ethan's contribution a sleek, vibrant logo-earned praise from the client. The team cheered, and I clapped him on the shoulder, my hand lingering a moment too long. He didn't pull away, but his eyes locked on mine, searching. "Good work," I said, my voice softer than intended. He nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing, and for a moment, the world felt too small, too warm. That night, back at the apartment, Ethan was quieter than usual. I was cooking me turned to make dinner and he hovered nearby, pretending to scroll on his phone. "You're not as bad as I thought," he said suddenly, his voice low. I turned, spatula in hand, raising an eyebrow. "As a boss," he clarified, but his eyes said something else. I laughed, trying to break the tension. "You're not as bad as I thought either," I shot back. He smirked, but it wasn't his usual cocky grin. It was softer, almost shy. The next day, a coworker, Mia, pulled me aside. "Ethan's been asking about you," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Like, personal stuff. Think he's got a crush." I laughed it off, but my heart raced. Ethan, the guy who'd mocked me for months. It didn't make sense. Yet I couldn't ignore the way he'd started listening when I spoke. The way he'd linger after meetings. Or how he'd stopped making jokes altogether. I told myself it was just guilt. Or maybe he was trying to secure his job. But deep down, I felt a pull I couldn't explain. By midweek, the office was abuzz with a new rumor. Ethan had turned down a date with a coworker, saying he was figuring some things out. I overheard it in the break room and felt a jolt I couldn't name. That evening, I found him on the apartment balcony, staring at the city lights. "You okay?" I asked, stepping outside. He didn't turn, but his shoulders tensed. "Just thinking," he said. "About what?" I pressed, my voice gentle. He hesitated, then said, "About how I was a jerk to you. And other stuff." My breath caught. I wanted to ask what other stuff meant, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I stood beside him, our arms brushing against the railing. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was heavy, full of things unsaid. I glanced at him, his profile sharp against the glow of the city, and felt something shift inside me. I'd spent months resenting him, but now, I saw a man wrestling with himself. Maybe even with feelings he didn't understand. You don't have to have it all figured out, I said finally. He looked at me, his eyes raw, and nodded. Thanks, Luke, he whispered, and my name on his lips felt like a confession. As we went back inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the edge of something dangerous, something neither of us was ready for. But I also couldn't deny the warmth spreading in my chest, the hope that maybe, just maybe, Ethan was starting to see Minute as a boss, not as a punchline, but as a man. The line between boss and roommate blurred as weeks passed, and so did the line between resentment and something softer. Ethan's designs kept improving, and he started seeking my feedback, not just at work, but at home, showing me sketches over late-night coffee. His questions weren't just about design, they were about me. How'd you know you were, gay? He asked one night, his voice hesitant, his eyes fixed on his mug. I told him about my teenage years, the fear, the freedom of coming out. He listened, really listened, and I saw a crack in his armor. A man questioning the world he'd always known. At work, Ethan was no longer the defiant newbie. He was focused, even collaborative, earning nods from the team. But it was his quiet moments that got to me. He'd bring me coffee during a late-night project, or when he'd laugh at my terrible puns, his eyes crinkling in a way that made my stomach flip. I tried to ignore it. He was straight, I told myself. He'd mock me for being gay. But the way he looked at me now, the way he lingered, made me wonder if I'd misread him all along. One evening, Vibe hosted a team happy hour at a rooftop bar. Ethan and I ended up alone at a corner table, the city skyline glittering below. You're good at this, he said, gesturing vaguely. The boss thing. The you thing. His words were clumsy, but his eyes were earnest. I smiled, my heart racing. Thanks. You're not so bad yourself. He laughed, then leaned closer, his voice low. I'm sorry, Luke, for the stuff I said before. I didn't get it. I nodded, my throat tight. I know. You're trying now. That matters. The moment stretched, charged with something neither of us named. Then Mia called him over for a game of darts, and the spell broke. But as I watched him laugh with the team, I felt a pang not of anger, but of longing. I pushed it down, telling myself it was impossible. He was straight. He was my roommate. He was my employee. Any one of those was reason enough to keep my distance. The next week, Ethan asked me to help him with a personal projecta portfolio to showcase his designs. We worked late in the apartment, our laptops side by side, our knees brushing under the table. You think I've got a shot at this design thing long term? He asked, his voice vulnerable. I looked at him, his hazel eyes searching mine, and said, You've got more than a shot, Ethan. You've got talent. He smiled, a real smile, and for a moment, I thought he might say something more. But he just nodded and went back to his work. The tension peaked during a client presentation gone wrong. A demanding client tore into Ethan's design, and I saw him shrink, his confidence crumbling. After the meeting, I found him in the break room, staring at the floor. You okay? I asked. He shook his head. I'm not cut out for this. I sat beside him, closer than I meant to. You are. You just need to believe it. He looked at me, his eyes raw, and said, You make it sound easy. My hand brushed his, and neither of us pulled away. The air crackled, and I felt the weight of everything we weren't saying. That night, back home, Ethan was quiet, pacing the apartment. Finally, he stopped in front of me, his voice barely above a whisper. Luke, I need to tell you something. My heart stopped. I nodded, bracing myself. I've been thinking about you, about us. His words hung in the air, fragile and heavy. I wanted to ask what he meant, but fear held me back. Instead, I said, "Take your time. Ethan, I'm here." He nodded, his eyes glistening, and walked to his room. As his door clicked shut, I realized I was falling for him, and that terrified me. Ethan's confession, if you could call it, that left me reeling. I barely slept that night, replaying his words, the way his voice trembled. By morning, he acted like nothing had happened, but there was a new weight between us, a silent question neither of us dared to answer. At work, he was professional, but his glances lingered, and I caught myself doing the same. I was his boss, his roommate, and now, maybe, something more. The lines were blurring, and I didn't know how to stop either if I wanted to. The next project was a make-or-break campaign for Vibe, and I paired Ethan with Mia for a key visual. They worked well together, but I felt a twinge of jealousy watching them laugh, heads bent over a tablet. I hated myself for it. Ethan wasn't mine, and I had no right to feel this way. But when he caught my eye across the room, his smile soft and meant for me, my heart betrayed me again. One night, after a long day, Ethan suggested we grab drinks, not with the team, just us. We ended up at a quiet bar in Williamsburg, the kind with low lights and vinyl records spinning in the background. "I'm not good at this," he said, staring into his whiskey. "At what?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Talking. Feelings. All of it." He took a deep breath. I've always been with women. But you're different." My breath caught. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him it was okay. But I stayed still. "You don't have to figure it out tonight," I said softly. He nodded, but his hand brushed mine on the table. Deliberate this time. The next day, Ethan threw himself into work. His designs bolder, more confident. I praised him in a team meeting, and he beamed. But later, in my office, he was nervous again. "I meant what I said last night," he whispered. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I feel something." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "Ethan, I'm your boss. We can't," he cut me off. "I know, but I can't stop thinking about you." Before I could respond, Mia knocked, and he left, his words echoing in my head. Over the next week, we danced around each other, every touch and glance electric. At home, we'd cook together, laugh, talk about everything but the thing that mattered most. One night, he showed me an old photo of himself, a skinny kid from a small town not unlike mine. "I was taught a lot of things that weren't true," he said, his voice low. "I'm trying to unlearn them." I reached for his hand, and he let me hold it, his fingers trembling. "You're doing good," I said, and he squeezed my hand, his eyes shining. But work complicated things. Rumors started swirling. People noticed Ethan's late-night visits to my office, the way we looked at each other. Mia cornered me one day, her tone gentle but firm. "Be careful, Lucas. He's your employee, and he's figuring things out." I nodded, but the warning felt hollow. I was already in too deep. By Friday, the campaign was due, and Ethan's design was the centerpiece. He nailed it, and the client loved it. After the presentation, the team celebrated, but Ethan pulled me aside. "I want to be honest with you," he said, his voice shaking. "I think I'm falling for you." My world tilted. I wanted to kiss him, to tell him I felt the same. But the weight of my role, our past, stopped me. "Ethan, we need to talk about this. Really talk." He nodded, his eyes full of hope and fear. And I knew we were standing on the edge of something that could break us both. Ethan's words hung between us like a fragile thread, and I didn't know whether to pull it or let it snap. We agreed to talk after work. But the day dragged. Every meeting a distraction from the conversation I both craved and dreaded. At home, we sat on the couch. The cities hum outside our window. I've never felt like this, Ethan said, his voice raw. Not with anyone. But I'm scared. Luke, I don't know what this means. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. It means you're human, and we'll figure it out together. He looked at me, his eyes searching, and I saw the boy from his photo, the one who'd been taught to hide parts of himself. I was wrong about you, he said. About everything. I didn't know how to handle it, so I made stupid jokes. I nodded, my chest tight. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. But forgiveness didn't erase the complications me role as his boss. The office gossip. The fact that he was still grappling with his identity. Over the next week, we tried to keep things professional at work, but it was impossible to ignore the pull. Ethan would brush past me in the hallway, his touch lingering, or leave a coffee on my desk with a shy smile. At home, we'd talk late into the night, sharing stories of our pasts, our fears. I told him about my first love, a high school crush that ended in heartbreak. He told me about growing up in a conservative family, where different was a dirty word. I'm not like that anymore, he said, his voice fierce. I want to be better. One night, after a long day, we ended up on the balcony again, the air cool against our skin. What are we doing, Luke? He asked, his voice barely audible. I turned to him, my heart pounding. I don't know, but I know I care about you. His breath hitched, and before I could think, he leaned in and kissed me. It was tentative, then desperate, his hands gripping my shirt like he was afraid I'd vanish. I kissed him back, my world narrowing to the warmth of his lips, the thud of my heart. The next morning, reality crashed in. At work, a coworker's raised eyebrow made me pull back, my role as boss looming large. Ethan noticed, his face falling. You're shutting me out, he said later. In my office. I'm trying to protect us, I replied, but it sounded weak. He shook his head. I don't need protecting. I need you. His words hit hard, but I couldn't shake the fear of what this could cost Ushi's job, my reputation, everything we'd built. By Friday, the office gossip had escalated. Someone had seen us leave the bar together weeks ago, and whispers followed us everywhere. I called Ethan into my office, intending to set boundaries. But he looked at me with such raw hope that I faltered. We need to be careful, I said, for both our sakes. He nodded, but his eyes were hurt. That night, he didn't come home until late. And when he did, he went straight to his room. The silence was deafening. I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the ache. Ethan's designs were still stellar, but he was distant, his smiles rare. I missed him, even with him right there. By the end of the week, I couldn't take it anymore. I knocked on his door, my heart in my throat. We need to talk, I said. He opened the door, his eyes wary but soft. I'm not giving up on this, I told him. On us. His face broke into a smile. And for the first time in days, I felt like we might be okay. The next few weeks were a tightrope walk. Ethan and I stole moments when we could quiet dinners, late-night talks, stolen kisses in the apartment's shadows. But at work, we were careful, too careful. Our every move watched. I hated the secrecy, the way it made something beautiful feel like a crime. Ethan felt it too. I don't want to hide, he said one night, his voice fierce. I'm not ashamed of this. I nodded, but the weight of my position held me back. I was his boss. One wrong move, and everything could unravel. The breaking point came during a team retreat in upstate New York. The team spent the weekend in a rustic lodge, brainstorming and bonding. Ethan and I were paired for a team-building exercise, our hands brushing as we built a makeshift raft. The others noticed, their glances sharp. That night, around a bonfire, Mia pulled me aside. People are talking. Lucas, you need to decide what's more important, your job or him. Her words stung, but they were true. I looked at Ethan across the fire, laughing with the team, and my heart ached. I didn't want to choose. Later, in the quiet of the lodge, Ethan found me in my room. I'm tired of pretending, he said, his voice breaking. I love you, Luke. I don't care who knows. My breath caught. Love. The word was a lifeline and a weight. I pulled him close, kissing him, my fears melting in the warmth of his arms. I love you too, I whispered, and it felt like a vow. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Vibe's CEO. I laid it all out, my relationship with Ethan, my commitment to the company, my hope to find a way forward. She listened, her face unreadable, then said, "You're one of our best, Lucas. But you know the rules about workplace relationships." I nodded, my stomach sinking. "I'll step down as creative director," I offered. "I'll stay on as a designer. But Ethan deserves a fair shot too." She raised an eyebrow, then nodded. "We'll work it out. But be discreet until we do." Back at the retreat, I told Ethan everything. He was furious at first. "You're giving up your dream for me," he demanded. "Not for you," I said. "For us." His eyes softened, and he pulled me into a hug, his breath warm against my neck. "We'll make it work," he promised. And I believed him. When we returned to the city, I transitioned to a senior designer role, and Ethan was reassigned to another team to avoid conflicts. The gossip faded, replaced by respect for our work. At home, we were free to be us, no more hiding, no more fear. Ethan moved into my room, our lives intertwining in ways I'd never dared hope. He was still learning, still unlearning the prejudices of his past. But he was all in, and so was I. One night, as we lay in bed, Ethan traced circles on my hand. "I was wrong about so much," he said. "But you're the best thing I've ever been wrong about." I laughed, kissing him, my heart full. We weren't perfect, but we were real, and that was enough. Months later, our apartment felt like a home, not just a shared space. Ethan's sketches covered the walls, mixed with my designs, a testament to our shared life. At Vibe, we thrived in our new roles, our work stronger for the trust we'd built. The team had moved on from the gossip, and we'd earned their respect, not just as colleagues, but as a couple who'd fought for each other. One evening, Ethan planned a surprise rooftop dinner under the stars. He'd cooked, set up fairy lights, even made a playlist of songs we'd shared. "I want to do this right," he said, pulling out a small box. My heart stopped. It wasn't a ring knot yet, but a keychain with our initials, a promise of a future together. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice steady. I kissed him, tears in my eyes, knowing he meant it. Looking back, I realized our story wasn't just about love. It was about growth, Ethan's journey from prejudice to acceptance, my journey from resentment to forgiveness. We'd both been shaped by our pasts, but we'd chosen to build something better. The world wasn't perfect, but in our little corner of Brooklyn, we'd found a truth worth fighting for: love, in all its messy, beautiful forms, was worth it. As we stood on that rooftop, the city alive below us, I thought about the note from that imagined image, the one that said, "He mocked my truth, then learned I'm his new boss." It was more than a clever twist. It was the start of a story that taught us both what it means to be seen, to be known, to be loved. And as Ethan's hand found mine, I knew we'd write the rest together.